Most people who say I've seen it at all are kind of joking. But our guest today, he actually has. He's worked with some of the world's biggest consulting firms like EY, Capgemini, and KPMG. He has led innovation in universities across UK and Australia, and somehow he still finds time to support student entrepreneurs, mentor PhD candidates, and sit on a global advisory board, right? So he moves between boardrooms, classrooms, and policy rooms with equal clarity. And we are lucky to have him with us today. Welcome to another episode of School to Startup, where we explore how leading academics are shaping the future of entrepreneurship and innovation. I'm Harish, your host for today. Joining me today, Professor Mark Loon. Let's get into it. Professor Loon, welcome to this session.
Thank you, Harish. I really appreciate it, and you're very kind. I appreciate your kind words.
Thank you very much, sir. So let's begin. You have had a career that spans continents, industries, and some pretty intense job titles, right? How did it all begin? What pulled you into this wild mix of consulting, academia, and innovation?
Yeah, thank you, Harish. Well, I guess I'll start off with I was born and raised in Malaysia, and that's where I started my career in consulting. So, like you say, I joined those firms, NCL, KPMG, and Capgemini, and it was a very interesting career. I really loved my time in consulting. I worked in the areas of strategy, corporate governance, operations excellence, and in different kinds of sectors. So I've worked with the Malaysian and Indonesian federal governments. I've worked with financial services, automotive, and from there, of course, in addition to Malaysia, I moved to Australia in my late 20s, where I worked for a number of interesting clients as well. And I also started my own business in consulting before I was lured into academia. So I started off, but fortunately, unfortunately, I fell into academia before I could really give that a good push. But the reason why I fell into academia was I actually did my doctoral studies, and I did that as part of my professional development in management consultancy. And whilst I was doing that, I really enjoyed the research, and I did think to myself, I could make this, into a career. I would like to see where this takes me. But of course, my heart at that time was still in management consulting. And then in a few years in Sydney, after that, I had the opportunity to move to the UK, which I did. And when I was in the UK, I thought to myself, okay, well, this could be an opportunity to not just have a fresh start in terms of a new country, but also a fresh start in my career. So what I did was I left the choice in the hands of the gods, so to speak. So I applied to both consulting and universities, and I said to myself, whichever one gets back to me first, I will take it up and see where it went. And lo and behold, a university was the first one to get back to me, and I got a job there. And since then, I have not looked back. Really enjoyed my time in higher education as much as I love management consulting.
Great. And through all those shifts, right? So what kept you excited, or what projects are you exploring these days that still light the fire?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I first started researching, I was very much the organizational behavior. But over the years, when I looked into behaviors that shaped the innovation mindset, I started moving into the innovation space. So right now, my area of research is really business model innovation. So as we all know, business model innovation, or BMI in short, is a process of changing the way an organization creates and delivers and captures value. It's the way that an organization organizes himself in a novel but also impactful manner. At this point in time, I'm sort of working in a couple of projects. So the first project is really looking at SMEs. And this builds on some of my previous projects whereby um, we found that SMEs, especially in the high technology sector, are very well placed to be very ambidextrous in the sense that they are very efficiency orientated, but also their processes allow them to be innovation enabling. And of course, this was very counterintuitive because, most of the time when we talk about business model, they are either innovation or very efficiency driven. But what we found is that SMEs, because of their circumstances, they need to be both, right? They had to be very cost efficient because they compete with other mass market producers, but also they need to have a degree of novelty to ensure that they have that they're able to survive. So the current research actually builds on how SMEs use standards. So standards as we see it, like dominant designs in technological standards, how they have used them to be competitive. And of course, the research has been very enlightening because, of course, internal capability is one of the reasons, but at the same time, we have seen them use standards in a very clever way because standards in some ways is used as a substitute for original research and development because SMEs can't afford it. But also at the same time, SMEs have been very clever in the way they target and they identify winning standards that would have a big impact in terms of interoperability in other systems. So, and in some of my research, I've spoken to a few entrepreneurs in the high tech SME sector, and they've said, you win some and you lose some, and that is the mindset. But the mindset is also to make sure you win more than you lose.
So, very interesting. Before we deep dive, a quick pause for our viewers. If you're enjoying this episode, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe to the Tracxn channel. We are bringing you more conversations like this with brilliant minds, real startup stories, and insights that don't just stay in the textbooks. All right, so let's keep going. Let's zoom in on students for a second, right? So you have been around some very dynamic academic ecosystems. What shifts are you seeing in how students today think about entrepreneurship?
Thank you, Harris. That is a really interesting question. I think entrepreneurship is really seen in a really broad way. So number one, of course, the most typical way is seeing entrepreneurship as starting a business. But what we are seeing as well is how students are sort of seeing entrepreneurship in terms of how they apply entrepreneurialism or the spirit of entrepreneurialism within employment, but also at the same time um, um, in terms of independent employment for themselves. So, like for example, in my school, we have part of us we are creative industries, and as we know, a lot of creative industries students end up being self-employed. So some of them do not want to become a big business. They keep it to just themselves. And they apply it to the notion of being self-employed as well as, being employed by someone else. So the concept or the notion of entrepreneurship is really broad and also really robust. And I think that is good news because I think students are beginning to realize that, the sort of regimented way of looking at not just a job or career, but life in general. As we know, gone are the days whereby people only work for one employers. Also gone are the days whereby people keep to one career. Like if you're an accountant, you keep to being an accountant for the rest of your life. I think a lot of that, is in the past because people now, they change careers, sometimes, careers into them being employed by other people are punctuated by, starting out in their own business. And sometimes a lot of people, as you know, have got side hustles. They do both at the same time. So I think, this creates a very interesting future, very creates a very interesting challenge for universities. But I think it's a challenge that we all relish because having these cohort of students with such a mindset, tends to challenge and push us as academics.
Interesting, and it's very true too. When you see those shifts, right, that hunger to build or to solve, are there any student-led projects or ventures that stood out for you recently?
Yeah. Um, well, I think a few years ago we had a student with a really novel idea, and it was one of those ideas that was aimed in solving everyday issue. Well, in particular, in a climate like ours in the Sunshine Coast, whereby we get a lot of sun, and that innovative idea was really how to help users apply sunscreen to hard to reach places. In fact, I think this idea gained some really good traction, and it was featured in MIT's Entrepreneur Bootcamp, and also there was philanthropic support as well. Um, More recently, there was a couple of students that came up with a nutrition-focused meal service business model, which was very successful because initially it was used to cater for athletes because it was nutrition rich, but now they have expanded it to other niche or mass markets. And this was a really good example of using extreme users to really test the product before rolling it out. So now they provide ready meals to cafes, for corporate catering, and also they also have ready made meals. But one of the things that we are broadening up, in addition to focusing on students, is also looking at infrastructure. So for example, like we now have got this Space to Sea accelerator, which was only launched in May this year. And this program backs high growth startups in developing technologies such as acoustic sensors, drone-based monitoring systems, geospatial intelligence, and it solves problems from defense to environmental stability, sustainability to other sectors. Um, we are also creating infrastructure in terms of labs for entrepreneurs to use. So this includes a final assembly hub for electrical vertical takeoff vehicles. And this, in order to help rapid prototyping, high-tech designs in cybersecurity, robotics, and advanced manufacturing. And I think given the trajectory of where entrepreneurship is going, where technology is so embedded, um, it we believe it's definitely in the right direction to focus on the infrastructure as well as the individual, because I think a lot of our education curricula is now, quite a lot of it is also is focused on the entrepreneurship part. But the trick is, okay, once you've got the students capability and mindset in place, what then? Where do they go? So hence that's why we think infrastructure is so important.
Amazing. I have a following question for that. It makes me wonder what kind of learning environment makes that possible, right? So, how are these newer entrepreneurship programs helping to learn or turn that into, raw curiosity into something that actually ships?
Yeah, well, great question, Haraj. So in terms of the learning, of course, you have content related learning in terms of marketing and all that. But I think one of the best takeaways that we have for students is three types of learning. The first is learning to learn with and from others, because when you talk about the future, when you talk about a volatile, uncertain world, you know, um, that sense making doesn't come from books. That sense making comes from working with other people. And I think the mindset here, in terms of learning with and other people, is to be curious and not competitive. Learn to collaborate and not compete. See diversity as an asset. Not everyone's going to agree with you, but that can be a good thing. Also, at the same time, role model. Learn how other people learn. Um, ask them how they approach problems before they get into solutions. As part of that, notice the methods, the tools that they use as part of their learning. The second learning is learning to unlearn. Now, this may seem quite simple, but as we know, we human beings are very entrenched in our habits, in our routine, and sometimes we keep to our tried and tested method so religiously that we subconsciously don't realize it. So hence, which is why I think learning to unlearn needs to be brought to the surface, because without undoing some of our habits and routines, sometimes it's very difficult to move forward. I just remember this a famous saying is, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting the same result. So if we know the future is going to be different, the way we work also would need to be different. So, learning to unlearn could be, spotting our routines, our habits, understanding what they are, separating fact for assumption, because sometimes through time, a lot of us we tend to take some of the things that we assume to be facts when in fact they're not. They're just our presumptions. Another way to learn to unlearn is to test alternative approaches. So, well, I always do A. What if I gave B a chance? Something else different could come of it. And try to use cognitive detachment. So, don't, because sometimes we have got vested interest in certain routines and certain habits because it forms part of our identity. But what we say, well, look, it's that's not me. That's just what I choose to do. So detach it from oneself. It makes it easier to unlearn. And then the last, of course, is learning to change. We know the only constant is change, and therefore it's important to learn to be adaptive and also to be able to anticipate change. Um, Also, part of this is learning to have a mindset of expecting challenge and resistance, um, expecting failure to happen. And when this happens, take it as a challenge to move forward. Don't let it break your spirit. Um, learning to learning to change as well is to learn how to break challenges into smaller pieces to make it more manageable. And last but not least, learn from role models. There are a lot of entrepreneurs and innovators there that have failed many times. See how they have come back from these challenges and learn from them. So I think, some of the things that we do in academia, in addition to the content we teach our students, is the skill to learn, the skill to learn for the future. It's just not from textbooks, but it's from an array of sources.
This is amazing. Thank you for that advice. And I think you have covered most of the things I wanted to ask. Uh, okay, so shifting gears from building startups to studying them, right? So, with everything you have researched and published, what's one question in entrepreneurship or innovation you would love to explore next?
Oh, well, I mean, I like to keep with business model innovation, but business model innovation from an international perspective, because as we know, we always think about business model innovation happening in the Western world. We always see business model innovation, being adopted by other countries more, um, more consistently, developing economies copying business models from developed economies. But I think a lot of that has changed. India, for example, India companies have got some very interesting business models and philosophy, like for example, Jugaad. So one of the areas I really want to look at is how business model innovation transpire as a phenomenon in the international stage, and how business model innovation occurs between developed and developing economies, but not just one way, the other way as well, from developing economies to developed economies. Because I think the evidence is there. A lot of firms from developing economies are looking at companies from Asia and they're going, wow, how are they able to do that? Now, of course, their environment is different, so you can't exactly copy and paste completely. But I think there are some lessons that Western organizations are taking notice of. And it's very interesting in terms of how they embed this into their business models.
Very interesting. Right. So let's zoom out again. Okay. In your view, what's the next evolution of university's role in this fast-changing startup world?
Oh, another good question. So I think many universities are already playing a role in entrepreneurship, in startup, and innovation. And they are involved from two extremes: very light touch to a very active role. So in terms of light touch, universities don't see themselves just as a place of education anymore, but it's also a place for innovation, entrepreneurship, and like my university, it's also a place for communities. So universities are providing support in terms of existing resources, infrastructure, in terms of resource for research. But some are taking a much more active role as well in terms of creating or supporting spinouts or creating spinouts from the university in itself. And a lot of this is in collaboration with government agencies and or industry partners. And of course, some of these spinouts can involve students, staff, or a mixture of both. Spinouts, of course, have been around for a while, but its success is not easy because spinouts require universities to operate in a way that is completely different from being a university. As you know, universities are, relatively bureaucratic, risk averse, and having spinouts is almost having a completely different personality. So we know some of the formula that makes spinouts successful, but whether universities can make that personality transition is a different thing altogether. And of course, a lot of universities operate within those two spectrum, light touch and also having an active role. For the future, I think universities, of course, have a lot to offer. I mean, you think about our research. Our research can really contribute in making businesses much successful. But ultimately, I think what makes universities take that extra step is really, it comes down to the business model. Whether or not universities can find a model whereby the support for startups can be synergistic with the other part of the model, which is education and research. Some have been able to find that balance, and some are still experimenting. So I think it's going to be a very interesting future because many universities will come up with their own models, one that works for them, one works for their history, the communities they serve, and also stakeholders. So I think this is something to keep an eye on.
Interesting. And for those students who are viewing, who have big ideas but no clue where to start, what's one piece of advice you would want them to take seriously?
I think network, and talk to people, because number one, by talking to people, they get to validate the ideas, not only in terms of the feasibility of the product or service that they have, but also in terms of evolving the idea. And of course, through network, you get to know people, you get to know not just technical people about the product or the market, but people who may be able to finance the venture. The second thing I like to think that I would impart to students who want to be entrepreneurs is think about not just the product, but also do not just invest in the product, but also invest in yourself. Venture capitalists and funders, when they fund a business, they're not just funding the great idea, they're funding the person, because they know the great idea, the product, the service has got a lifespan. So they want to know what happens after the product, what next. And the what next depends on the entrepreneur themselves. So funders are looking at the entrepreneur themselves, not just the product. So for budding entrepreneurs, invest in yourself. The last advice I would have for students who want to be entrepreneurs is don't focus too much, don't focus just on the product. I know initially they have to, but focus on the business. The product is not your baby, because the product, like I said, has got a lifespan. It's got a shelf life. So budding entrepreneurs need to raise their head above the parapet, look beyond the product, and look at the business as a whole. And even sometimes the best entrepreneurs are the ones who cannibalize their own product, because it's better for you to cannibalize your own product rather than your competitor, because at least then you're in control of the process.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And finally, where can our viewers go if they want to follow your work or connect further, or if you want to tell about any program that you want to share, you can do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Harish. So my work has come out mostly in journals. So journals like Journal of Management Studies, Academy of Management, Learning and Education, and also Journal of World Business. I do hope to write a book one day, but we'll see whether I can squeeze some time in the middle of my work.
Great. And that's it. That's it for today's School to Startup. If this conversation with Professor Loon made you rethink your whole career plan, same thing here. Smash that like button, drop your hot takes in the comments, and hit the subscribe so you don't miss the next drop. More real talk, more startup chaos, more professors who get it. See you on the next one. Thank you very much, Professor Loon. Thank you for your time. Thank you for incredible advice that you have given.
Thank you, Harish. My pleasure.